Hello, my name is Tom Suter, and I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. Thank you for joining us today. The title of what we're going to talk about is Modernizing Federal IT through DevSecOps, very timely subject. I'd like to welcome all the attendees. Definitely special thanks to Kristen Nicholson, Matt Stratton, and the rest of the Red Hat team. They've been with a partner with us as long as HARC's been doing DevOps. So we got a really great panel for you. I'm going to introduce them in a second, but we're going to have a combination panel. We're going to ask you some poll questions. We're going to have Q&A. I think we'll be keeping it pretty lively. And if all the panelists can get their video and audio on, I think we got a full house. Okay, I'd like to welcome Todd Simpson. How are you doing today, Todd?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, he recently became Deputy Assistant Secretary for DevOps at the Office of Information Technology, Office of the Deputy Secretary for VA. Definitely we'll be touching base with him in a second. And Todd, where are you out of today? I'm actually out of the office?
Yeah, I'm in the office.
Yeah, we're starting to get a little bit of that. People are actually getting back to the office. And we also have with us today Edmund Kuko, who's works over at the Naval Information Warfare Center, Atlantic DevSecOps Lead Systems Engineer at the U.S. Navy. How are you doing today, Edmund?
Great, thank you for having me.
Good, good. And I told you before in the prep call, I love the sticky notes and the planning and everything behind me. It gets me very excited. Welcome. And we also have with us Christopher Christ. How are you doing today, Chris?
All right so far.
Good, good, good. Well, it can only get better, I guess. Chief Operations and Development, DevOps at the U.S. Transportation Command, USTC, and a recent GuiTech Award winner. So we grabbed him after he won his award, and we recruited him to this panel. That's just kind of how we roll here. And then last but not least, we have with Matt Stratton, North American Public Sector Transformation Office at Red Hat.
Yeah.
And you got the company colors on, Matt.
I do. It's, and the red pops. So I like that, it kind of, yeah. When you can show the colors and, and it's aesthetically pleasing, it's, a win for everybody.
It's a good look for you. Could you manage to fit? Where's that fedora? I like, don't you guys have
I've got too
fedora?
much hair. It doesn't fit so my kids wear it instead.
Fantastic. And so where are you out of, Matt?
I'm in Chicago.
Chicago. It's my kind of town. I love that place. I love the hot dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And the beef on the whack and all that. So
yeah, exactly.
You make me want to.
Yeah.
Wrigley Field, Italian beef. Exactly. Well, let's get things kicked off. I would love to go to you, Mr. Simpson. First of all, I got to know, how is it being hired during a pandemic? How is it being onboarded and talking to everybody and nobody's in the office? That must be an interesting experience for you, but I'd love to hear how it's going for you at the VA.
It's actually been very interesting. It's given me a chance to really see just how professional and organized the VA really is. I onboarded about 10 weeks ago and it was seamless. My equipment was ready for me. My equipment worked. My PIV card was mailed to me in advance, temporary PIV card, and I was able to get right online and pretty much jump right into the mesh fairly quickly. And to be honest with you, I've never had such a seamless experience onboarding at any agency I've ever worked at. So I think it's a real testament to some of the efforts that took place. That as I prepared for this call, a lot of the discussion that I was trying to generate in my own mind was what we've been doing around the pandemic, and in my case, a lot of the work was done before I got here. So I get to talk about some of the great things that other people that are on my team and next to me, my peers, have already done. So it's been a great experience for me so far.
So just to follow up, how has it been? I know a lot of agencies, they were co-located, they had development teams working together. and you know, from your old place too, how has that transition gone? Just kind of the new way of doing work and doing development. Did they have to bring on any new tools over at the VA? What did that look like?
Well, that's an interesting question, and fortunately, the VA's DevSecOps journey began long before I got here, and it's kind of a two-parter because I'm responsible for the development, the security, and the operations groups, and the operations group consisting of a help desk, end user computing, infrastructure network, the traditional kind of IT model, and then we have that DevSecOps journey that took place. So back about 2 years ago, they started long before I got here on this product line management approach, where they identified 5 portfolios and 30 product lines, and they packaged their 800 applications inside those categories, and really started that kind of agile journey, the whole journey with SAFe and the DevSecOps. It all began long ago. So I was actually, I came in at a really good time. And I mean, I consider myself very lucky to have come in when I did, because a lot of the groundwork has been put in place to position us for success. And a lot of the stuff that we did and continue to do to support the veterans over the last 6 months or so was a direct result of those agile processes and practices that my team has already been following. So, you know, I kind of look at it like my job is that much easier as we roadmap toward the future, and, you know, continue with that cultural shift that my leader, that the CIO, Mr. Jaffer, has, you know, put us on. And so I'm just really grateful for that, to be honest with you. But you can see the results and how quickly we were able to increase just the bandwidth and the tools around just simple things too, like just getting into a building now. I went out on the road and went to a couple of the medical centers. And before you go into a medical center, you can answer your COVID screening questions over text and get the pass to actually get into the building. And that kind of stuff was spun up and released to production in a matter of days. So it's a real testament to the workforce here.
Yeah, and I think we'll get a little bit more about the pace of change and some of the things that have happened there. It's been remarkable. I think the last time we talked to you about it was IT modernization, and this has really been this pandemic has been a forcing function of that. Next up, why don't we go to you, Edmund? Let us know what's going on over there. And tell us what all those sticky notes mean.
Oh, that's a challenging questions, right? If you look at the left or right, depending on your perspective or point of view, right? You got work to do. I mean, forgive me, work to do and work being done or in progress. It is a challenging situation, right? And then you throw the COVID on top of that and this remote telework concept in government. That's, you know, it's a challenge due to the fact that some of our infrastructure is still it's up and coming, right? We're taking some drastic changes to ensure that our large workforce can accommodate a lot of these connectivity challenges, right? And one of those great stories is that what the DoD CIO was able to do by procuring this IL2, you know, Microsoft Teams, which is definitely escalated some of this collaboration and this DevSecOps mindset by actually completely removing this dependency of should you be in person or should you be remote, right? It's irrelevant. Like you can start these Teams channels, and our teams, you know, drastically using these tools. And in the regular basis, we have multiple channels following this DevSecOps, you know, pattern or philosophy, right? You got a development channel, you got our security channel, you got our operations teams, that constant feedback. You know, we have our networking, our single sign-on folks. So it's impressive, you know, when folks come together, how much we can accomplish, right? From a Navy perspective, there are multiple efforts that we are currently executing to ensure that DevSecOps is not simply just the means, right? Or the end to the means, right? It's simply just that starting of a journey on how we approach capability delivery, how we improve the way we buy, build, and deploy some of these, you know, technologies that we have in use. And then how, you know, to echo to the previous speaker is that how do we ensure that user experience, right, is that instant feedback, right? Before you go to the door, that information is available to you. And that's the intent. At the NIWIC or Naval Information Warfare Center Atlantic, we are in process actually deploying a platform as a service solution where we are trying to then expand that further up at Navy to onboard some of our mission owners to fully take advantage of some of these, automation tools, the processes, right? A lot of our team members have gone through training. Speaking of Red Hat, it's one of the platforms that we're utilizing right now to kind of remove some of that complexity layer, right? To have the programs of record and mission owners focus more on the capability delivery rather than trying to make things how they work, right? The system doesn't communicate with the system. My remote office cannot VPN in my, so it's that collaboration effect of it. We are definitely taking, lesson learned. Previously, I supported as a chief engineer on the VA side. Early 2011, we actually did Agile and DevSecOps in the early stages, delivering the Veterans Benefits Management System through NAVWAR and NIWIC Atlantic. So, we've learned from there and we try to instill that practice. And then from then, we just, sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, lots of good stuff there to unpack. How about the platform as a service? Does that look anything like Nick Shalon in the Air Force, or is it, where do you guys keep it? What does that look like?
It's challenging because each branch in government, right, they have certain requirements in terms of security and compliance, right? Navy, for example, has their own security, their naval authorizing official, as well as their processes of the risk management framework. Everything is risk-based and risk-assessed, right? Like, is your system in compliance and can be delivered quickly and securely by ensuring that these systems are performing at the performance level that they're expected. In terms of comparison, it's really hard to compare, apple and oranges, even though they're fruits, right? In terms, a network within the Air Force is slightly different than a network, configuration on the Navy side or the Army or, Coast Guard or VA, speaking. These are some of these intricate details that we are working across agencies. One would say, why is Navy, considering their platform? Why is Air Force considering their platform? It's meeting different needs to different mission own requirements. It doesn't mean that we're not communicating with one another, right? I've had, constant feedback with Nicolas Shalon on that side to ensure that, hey,
Sure.
so what are some of the lessons learned on your side, right? Like, how can we bypass some of those hiccups in the process by you sharing that information? Vice versa goes, from us to them as well. So it's simply trying to find the right cadence when it comes to what are the requirements, and having this mindset of one size fits all solution. It can work in some cases by any means, but in a real, practical world, planning is great when you plan it, but once you hit the mission, you start scratching your head going, oh yeah, this is a completely different architecture, different infrastructure, different Navy, talking about networks, speed for that matter, and things of that nature. Oh.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with your network. I installed it a long time ago, but that's another story. I also installed the VAs. So great. And next up, we'll go with you, Chris.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's actually really exciting to hear, Edmund, kind of what you got going on over there. And I think that we kind of mirror that a little bit over here at U.S. Transportation Command. So, we're somewhat of a complex organization, as I imagine a lot of government entities are. And so we do have Air Mobility Command, Service Deployment and Distribution Command, and we also have Military Sea Lift Command under us. And so, when we look across all those subordinate commands, we have a lot of programs that we're attempting to work with and trying to help them to move forward with DevSecOps methodologies. So I think that from our perspective, the challenge, I suppose, is not necessarily the technical aspect of it. We can put together the tools and the pipeline and, work with OpenShift over there with Red Hat, things like that. We can do all of that, and that's not an issue, thankfully. We have brilliant people over at Red Hat, brilliant people at, Amazon who can help us with these things, and we have some great engineers and computer scientists to do those things. It's mostly about the culture and helping people to understand the importance of DevSecOps and what it can do for the Department of Defense. And so at our organization, we had a mandate to sprint to the cloud, meaning get all of our programs to the cloud. And that was a few years back. And as you can imagine, They did. They went fast, but you skip a few steps along the way. And so my branch was somewhat newly developed. It's been about a year now, and we came to realize that, oh my gosh, our services that we're providing to our customers, they're not compliant. They're not really mature and good to go. So we've been spending a lot of time maturing our services for our customer. And so we've had to collaborate with a lot of other divisions within our organization. And when we started to do that, we started to realize how much people do not know about DevSecOps, even within our own organization. And so we've really had to shift. We thought we were going to come in, put things in place, get things moving, but now we kind of had to take a step back and say, okay, we need to shift to being communicators of what this is about. And we need to shift to a psychology frame and help people to understand this. And so a lot of our role has been, how do we communicate the message? I had a briefing that I had to give about it right before all this took place. I had a division chief stand up at the end of this and say, Chris, until you came here, I thought that a DevSecOps pipeline were literally 4 computers hooked together in some cloud environment somewhere else. And I thought, okay, we got a lot of work to do. So that's been primarily our challenge here. That's what we've been trying to do, is trying to communicate the message and get people to understand the benefits of DevSecOps. A lot of successes, but a lot of challenges ahead of us as well.
And how is the workforce, with the pandemic? Do you think they're able to get more done, less done? Are they adopting DevSecOps as a result of it? What has changed before and after, now that we can look back? How many months has it been? Been almost 6 months. Oh my goodness. Yeah. What's changed before and after? We can actually say that now.
Yes, we can. Well, from our perspective, to be honest with you, it's actually been a benefit to us. The remote working has been a benefit. We were able to get a hold of people almost whenever we want. Even if they're in a meeting, we can still ping them. So we've actually been able to collaborate quite a bit more, actually. And even with our contractors, with the developers working the different programs, we with teams, I think, you guys brought up a very good example of that. Edmund, you brought up a good example with that. And so our developers, we can all just set up a channel for this program. For example, we'll set up, okay, this program, we have a team, if you will, within Teams. And we just, hey, when you're going, hey guys, have you heard about this? Or hey, we're about to, put this out there, or we're looking into OpenShift. What are your thoughts? Things like that. And so it's really, really made communication very easy and a lot simpler for us. So, I think at first it was a little chaotic and hectic. I did have to deploy to New York, as I'm a medical service corps officer in the Air Force Reserve. So I had to be out for a little bit dealing with that when it all first went down. But coming back, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that people are, really got this down, and collaboration has been pretty strong.
Yeah, I'll give DoD CIO some credit. Usually it takes about 18 months to get a memo out. They got that memo about working with Teams and the other platforms in about a week, I think. It was crazy. So desperate times call for desperate measures, but it was good. It was a good memo, and it got people starting to collaborate right away rather than worrying about it. Last but not least, we will go to Matt Stratton. We're really interested to hear. I know you bring a lot of perspective, not just across government, which I want to hear about, but also across industry. How has the financial sector, the healthcare sector, embraced DevSecOps in the wake of all this, all the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and I think it's been really interesting to see, and especially on the public sector side, when we think about transformation and the way this year has gone. Because a lot of the times my talking points when I'm talking to organizations about transformation, we talk about the need for resiliency because of the fear of disruption or the risk of disruption. And usually when we say disruption, everybody's head goes to like Uber or Netflix or Amazon. And, most of you on the call here are like, Uber's not coming after my agency or whatever. But then we had something like COVID, right? Like startups aren't the only disruptor. And I spend a lot of my effort, again, it's like, I love, it's like, Chris said, right? Like the tech is easy. I can handle this. And I love me some Kubernetes. I love me some OpenShift, but it's the socio part of the socio-technical system that I think is so key, especially when we talk about the need for resiliency. And resiliency is adaptive capacity, is how does our system, which is a socio-technical system, have the graceful extensibility to flex against the things we can't predict. right? Robustness, we can do high availability, we can do load balancers, we can do auto scaling. That's the technical part, but how do we adapt? And I think we've seen great examples of it. And, Tom, you just said one with DoD CIO, right? Like you said, hey, normally it takes them this long, but that's resilience in the system. And I saw this on a call I was on with the IRS, with the CARES Act. They said, you know what, we had to make a lot of changes really fast because of this. And it's funny, it turns out we could do it, right? And that's the thing. And I hope the lesson that we learn from these forcing functions is we had a lot of beliefs about, and this is the private sector was big on this, about what work can be done remotely. Oh, we could never do that job remotely. We could never do that. And then when you have to, not only can you, but to Chris's point, sometimes it's done better, and maybe there's things we've been assuming we have to do a certain way. So as we express that resilience, as our systems expand and extend, I just hope that we don't then bring everything back again and not learn from this and not continue to get better.
No, I think you're bringing up some good points, Matt. I just think that a lot of agencies, and it seems to make sense, let's hire everybody in a given area and bring them into one facility and collaborate. But then you might lose out on a lot of talent. And now that we're remote anyway, now I don't have to, not to pick on the USDA, but they've got a big development center in Fort Collins. Well, there's not that many developers that live in Fort Collins. I think a lot want to live in Fort Collins because it's a beautiful place, but where's the talent? It doesn't have to be in that geographical location. And I think that we've seen some benefits. It's not like a lot of, these kinds of benefits are, well, let's take advantage of a crisis, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to ask a couple questions. We'll probably go hit a poll here pretty soon, but, what are the challenges brought forth in your agency due to COVID-19, specifically related to DevSecOps? Do we have to get some new tooling? We kept talking about culture? Does anybody want to add a little color to that question? Some things that had a shift in the organization.
I can jump on that. Again, It depends in certain environments, right? Or your mission requirement needs in terms of. I just want to echo what Christopher mentioned, right? Culture is one of the fundamental, or the basic tenets of any problem statement, either being this teleworking concept, or if it's being a developer, if it is junior or senior guy, how further you want to go with a career. But to focus on your question particularly is that me personally, I'm one of those folks that I'm 5 days a week at work. It's something that I'm focused, and I know I'm at work, so I focus at work. And if I'm outside of work, know that I'm not doing my job. It's simply that I'm distracted more. In terms of COVID, and the pandemic right now, I needed to readjust myself to the point that, hey, working from home and having the right tools to support you to, towards your mission requirements, it's not really a bad idea. It's not a bad job. It's actually, I want to, echo one more time when we said that before I couldn't find some folks at their location. They were at work in their cube or in their office, but I would walk by and they're probably on the break or somewhere else. Right now, I can just, get on Teams, ping or tag somebody, and within minutes, they will reply. I'm not asking them where they at simply, right? But hey, this is the problem. We got a down system. Customer is upset. How we can remediate this issue? So definitely changed how we think. And then as well, it actually improved our, I want to say our way of life in a way, but how we think on how we deliver capabilities, right? Right now we have some of our build systems that we're designing to send notification directly to some of our chat clients, which instantly get that, that feedback from a development perspective. Some of our developers in terms of from the past and now experience tend to be a bit funny in terms of their messaging, sending on their builds. But it's something that it kind of brought us together. But on the same note, it opened our eyes that working together on the same room, it's great benefit, but finding the right tool to help you do your job is just as equally important as well. Over.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in? Go ahead.
I'll say that, speaking from someone who interviewed and was hired over a video conference, the COVID experience, I think, kind of it really redefined the definition of continuity of operations at VA, and it kind of forced us, I think, to look at ways to solidify some of the stuff that we were doing, like over Teams, our video conferencing over Teams. We've now standardized on Teams, and we've eradicated the other video conference tools that we had, and so we're going all in on that, and we're also, I think, really focusing in on that digital experience, not only internally for our customers internal, but also for our vets in telehealth, especially. On one of my site visits, I was speaking with the chief of staff at a hospital, and at a VA hospital. And the chief of staff said, we are never going to go back to the way we used to do business. This chief of staff articulated a vision where waiting rooms are going to be a thing of the past, for example. And that, I think to quote him as best as possible, that the shopping malls are going to replace the waiting rooms for us. And and we've already implemented tools, electronic tools, to notify our veterans when their appointment is ready, for the ones that are actually coming in. For the ones that are still, we've quadrupled our telehealth services. What was just a small part of our business has now become our primary business, just as an example. So I would say that this whole experience has really accelerated that digital transformation, and now we're taking it, as far as we can, replacing fax-based services with APIs that convert the faxes into PDFs, just as an example. And I would be remiss if I didn't kind of do a foot stomp for the whole culture piece. I just want to say I'm behind that 100%. At VA, we have a highly distributed workforce. It's centralized, unlike any of the other agencies that I've worked at before. And it's centralized but highly distributed. So most of my staff, 7,000 FTEs plus thousands of contractors spread out across the country. So this standardization around one video technology, one way of collaborating, the increases in the bandwidth have only served the VA better and made us stronger. And now it doesn't matter. I think, the one thing I'll say is that I'm kind of a workaholic, but most of the people I work with are workaholics, and this workday, maybe it's not the healthiest thing, but it really doesn't end. It just goes on, and I hear that's the culture of VA. People are very dedicated here, but these tools, they further enable that. So,
does anybody want to add? I really wanted to get to that, the citizen experience. Or are we really going to roll in our 96-year-old grandmother into a Social Security office to get some benefit explained? Are those days over? And we all have constituents. Are they? Can we? I don't think we can put that genie back in the bottle. How has that helped us when we're thinking about the user experience? I have a feeling the pandemic has really changed that. How has it affected in your organizations? Chris and Edmund, if you want to chip in on that, that'd be great.
I'll pass to Chris, so he's been quiet.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I got a piece of that. So
yeah, go ahead.
Kind of elaborating a bit on your question. So what is it specifically you're asking there on that?
Well, it's just like how are you going to change the way you do development? Is it the way your user experience? Are people expecting it a little bit differently now than maybe some of the old ways that you delivered your services?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, maybe nothing exciting from my perspective. To be honest with you, I would have to stick with my original message. I think that perhaps actually we've gotten used to things happening a little bit faster in our organization. We've gotten used to faster communication. We've gotten used to faster responses. some of the things that we've been able to do within our organization, we were able to cut down some of the time in half of what we originally thought.
Yeah.
And so I think perhaps maybe what we may see is that the expectation is going to be, well, hey, you were able to do this in this time frame. So I think that we're going to have to keep that momentum going. So, you know, I'm sorry, I don't have any negative things to say at this point. I really think that for us, it really has been positive. We've been able to move things forward a lot faster than before. And so I don't think that we really sat down and had those conversations around exact expectations in terms of how fast the service will be delivered.
Right.
But I do know that, I suppose informally, I think that we've been pretty happy within our organization with how fast we've been moving. So I think that if we were to see it slow down or change as a result of maybe having to go back to the office or something like that, I think that we would, you know, be up in arms with, hey, we can't do this. We got to go back to what we were doing. Yeah.
I think it's the new normal. And Ed, specifically to you, are your to-do and dones moving faster than they used to be? Are they moving? You got to keep those sticky notes moving.
My challenge is that I can't have my guys stop at 8 hours, right? They're plugged in and they're just like 7 o'clock and I'm checking, you know, my messages. I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? Like, do I have to just go by their house, unplug the internet cable, right? So it's drastically improved us in terms of having that ability to like just jump on the call at an instant, having a question and working with our vendors, you know, our industry partners in terms of just recently we had a meeting with Red Hat trying to figure out some caching issues in our Kubernetes cluster. You know, we were like, listen, guys, we need to get on the call right now. And, you know, within 30 minutes, everything happened. If we had to go via our traditional model, via the acquisition old models, is that first we had to like send a request, you know, then I had to check out if there was a room available. And then I had to see if I got a conference line available. So, you know, some of these things kind of tack up and I wouldn't say it discourages you from going fast. It's just that, you know, it's a challenging situation. DevSecOps hasn't been there for too long. A lot of folks truly think of DevSecOps simply just deploying applications, right? Or automating the piece of it, but they're all components of your, you know, SDLC lifecycle, being even procurement, right? Logistics piece of it, right? Is that you need the operations, make sure the messaging is correct, using like this enterprise level ERP systems like Oracle e-business or you know, the SAP's, you know, ERP systems. So it depends on how you train your workforce. And then on the same time, you need to be cognizant about helping them realize that even though it's easier to do your job remotely, but you know, you got to have that boundary of work-life balance as well. So it's, you know, I want to echo again what the gentleman said earlier, right? Is that it has its benefits, but then it has its downfalls, and the downfalls are not bad, they're good, but like you got to find a way on how to actually help everyone understand that we're in this together. Our leadership has been definitely one of our, you know, strong advocates when it comes to pushing hard, you know, on both ways, right? We have that top-down approach as well as a bottom-up approach where we got smart folks within our command in Navy on NIWIC Atlantic side, as well as, you know, when we need some additional resources to be plugged in with our teams to supplement that additional need for an emergency requirement or for some set of a larger concept, then we try to accommodate in all the ways. One thing I wanted to kind of emphasize though, right, is that culture is important, but culture from an execution perspective or the engineers and the developers, I think they're at the point where they understand it. I wouldn't say great, but we got a good understanding. There is still a little bit of a, you know, a challenge that it needs to be that bi-directional relationship on culture, right? Like leadership top down as well as our, you know, the engineering arm to push and work with our leadership partners, you know, in this, because it has to be a leadership and executive buy-in rather than just delivering a capability and then suddenly all that platform, all that great work we just did kind of vanishes, right? And then you get to the next challenge. Over.
Yeah. I think there's a really good, I just wanted to, like, when you talk about the boundaries, and I was thinking that earlier in the call when Chris was, you know, so excited that you could get a hold of anybody whenever you want them. And I was like, yes. And that's also terrible. Right. You know, and I've been a remote worker for like almost 10 years, you know, pre-COVID, and those boundaries are so hard. So, but the reason I think that plays right into like a little bit, like I thought I had about that plays into what Edmund was just talking about leadership, is it's about example. And you have to have buy-in from the leadership, but it's the behaviors of leadership. So a great example is like, if you're a leader, you don't send emails to your team at 10 o'clock at night, because yes, maybe that's the time you had to do it, but that's giving this message that 10 o'clock at night and also if I get that email at 10 o'clock at night from my boss, I'm going to think it's real important. I have to do something about it, even though that just happened to be the time that Chris was available. And that goes into the cultural thing. There's so much behavior that's reinforced by the things that leadership focuses on. And that's could be a whole other conversation, but getting that culture, like you don't actually change culture, you change behavior, right? And you change behavior by thinking about what you reflect as important as a leader, what's incentivized and things like that. And that's all the really squishy parts. It's also the really interesting part.
Matt, I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think that it's going to be one of those things that we kind of work through as we kind of adapt to the new way that we're working. One thing I did just want to kind of come in on Chris's coattails a little bit, kind of around the speed to delivery, specifically around the way that we accredit systems. So we actually accredited our VA Video Connect system in 3 weeks, and that's down from what used to be 26 weeks. And just as an example, this is a system that in January, we had 2,500 video patient calls a day. And in August, we had 35,000 video meetings a day, where these are real life patients with real life problems that are interacting with doctors and getting medical advice and prescriptions. So, I mean, I had to kind of echo that. I didn't mean to take any steam away from what you just said, because you're spot on with your comments too. When I get that email from my boss on a Saturday, I take it very seriously. And that's something that, we just kind of have to kind of work through. But I just want to underscore some of the really good work that's being done here. And that speed to delivery was something, that it was kind of like an awakening that, hey, we can do this so much quicker. And I think that that's going to have an exponential effect on the way that we move forward.
And Tom, if you don't mind, just one more thing to just
maybe
foot stomp this whole, remote work thing. So before I had some challenges with getting some top quality talent to help us with this stuff. You trying to get computer scientists and engineers that know what they're doing can be challenging, especially for the government, I think. And I had an individual that I knew actually very well. I had worked with in the past. He got a job with IBM, had been working with them. But like Matt over here, he's been remote working since the beginning, and he's had all this flexibility. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even have to put in 40 hours a week. If he can get his job done in 32 hours, he's good. He gets his salary, he's good to go, right? So there's a ton of flexibility in that. And so when I offered him a job roughly a year ago, I said, hey, I would really love to have you. He says, and I have to go into the office. And that was essentially the end of the conversation. So I'm really hopeful that the government can benefit from this as well, from that perspective, and getting top talent into our organizations.
Yeah, I think that'll go a long way. I think that would go a long way, and that's one of the blessings. I know there was a memo put out by one of the agencies as soon as pandemic hit that they said, we expect you at your desk 40 hours a week and not to let your family interfere with what you're doing. It was like one of the most boneheaded things ever. We will not mention that agency, but it was an actual thing. As we're in the middle of a pandemic and schools have closed. So I think we're getting out of that mentality. I think we have been forced to get out of it. I think it's a very, very, very good thing. One more question before we get into the polls. So we've had pandemic, we've gone remote. Are there some things that we need to watch out for, negative things that require us to be in person, or what are we missing? Is some work getting done faster? Is all work getting done faster? What are some of the things that when we get back to being in person, that there are some benefits, or if there's none? What are some of the pitfalls of working completely remote all the time? Does anybody want to think about that one?
Well, I'll take a quick bite at the apple and just say that, having the luxury of having a distributed workforce, I'm always going to be bound to some kind of electronic mechanism or means like Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams. in the case of VA, it is Microsoft Teams. I try to stay vendor agnostic on these panels, but it is what it is. And so there's no escaping that reality for me. It's interesting because a lot of the distributed workforce are actually coming into their offices, and when I talk to them, I didn't make any of my staff come into the office. They're doing it because they're just really dedicated, or maybe they have distractions at home or things like that. But I've actually thought a lot about this, and I think the world's going to change from this pandemic as it probably should. And we're not going to have the flying cars, but it's getting one step closer to the Jetsons every day. And at the end of it, we're going to be working remote. We're going to be working over video and over phone lines. Just as a normal practice. And when I will say this though, we had a strategic planning session just last week here at VA where all of the VA leadership in IT came together, and we were socially distanced and we wore our masks and we followed all the CDC guidelines, so everyone was safe and no one got sick from the experience. There were maybe 6 to 8 of us in a room at one time, and we were way spread out, and it was great to be around the other leaders. It was really, it was weird, but it was really great. And so I think that people are going to enjoy when they can actually start to interact with one another again. And that's probably the one thing that I miss most about this whole pandemic, that not only the socializing with my friends on the outside, but inside, just being able to go have a cup of coffee with, and I have coworkers, they're all over this building, but we socially distance. So we don't have lunch together most days, and we actually still call one another on Teams, even though I've got friends and peers and employees just right around the hall from me. So
I think it's really key to remember that what we're doing right now is not working remotely. We are working from home during a pandemic. Like I've been a remote worker for 8 years, and the last 6 months has been terrible, right? Like this is not me working at home. But I think and it goes back to what Todd was saying, because even when you're a distributed workforce and you're remote work, there are still opportunities where you engage with each other, you get together. Like I had a team I was on before, once a quarter, we picked a city, and we went and we had an offsite together, just to be in a room together and to think about things in a different way. And we can't do that right now, right? Or we're not doing that right now, but we will. And I think so that's the thing to look at, is that this future of remote work is not going to look like what the last 6 months have looked like for most people. Again, when you're a truly remote worker, you're not like working from your dining room table, hunched over your laptop. Probably you have a dedicated workspace, and you chose where you lived and your house and your space because it was a place you worked. And I think that's going to be a cultural change as more and more people become distributed. When we look to that. But like the key of all this is to remember the outcomes that we get out of being in person, and we do this so much. We try to replicate that. And this came up, right? Like, well, how do we used to do physical sticky notes. So let's have some software that makes it look like a sticky note. Okay, but what's the outcome we're trying to do, right? So I think that's the thing, is we don't have to replicate things that are bound by the laws of physics to get the outcomes we want.
Yeah, I think from ATARC, I believe we were a waterfall nonprofit. We'd have a meeting once a week. We'd all meet in person. And then a week later, that's not exactly the way I want it. Now we meet every morning very briefly, and we get more done. We're communicating. We're not going down the wrong road as much. I do think that I do miss like the quarterly brainstorming session where we kind of let go and we have a few drinks and we got sticky notes. And I think that has been one thing. I will say one thing about the video. It definitely is much better than a conference call. I don't think you never got my best stuff on a conference call. I realize that now. I was half paying attention and cranking out emails. At least with the video, it's a forcing function. But I think when we get back in person, I'm going to just like break down emotionally, because it's like, I miss people, and even though I see them on video, it'll be nice to see people in person. So I think and multinationals have had this. I don't want to keep going here, but multinationals have had this issue for a while. They've been using Teams and these collaborative software for a while. And then once a year, they might have their annual, you know, developer conference or whatever field they're in. And then you kind of get to know that. That's really where you get to know the person, you know, when you get in person, you know, in person. Go ahead.
Just wanted to add one item to that, right? So as a leader, it's not just the necessity to bring you together for just work, right? You got to find those off the cuff moments. Just recently, my team, you know, was kind of putting me on spots. I said, hey, you know what? Let's go out and have a drink. You know, of course, maintaining the social distancing, being prepared and all that. But today is one of those days, right? After this meeting around, you know, 1600, we all trying to get together because as humans, we still miss that fact of, you know, that social interaction, but on the same time, you know, being, you know, mindfully prepared, you know, and being careful with everyone else around you and yourself. But we always need to ensure that being together just for work is one concept of it, but being together as a team, right? Emphasizing and respecting those boundaries as well as that social aspect of it, it makes you a stronger team. So then you kind of limit a lot of those dependencies, if you call it in agile terms, or impediments. You work as a team and you accomplish so much more. So I want to emphasize that aspect of it, that, you know, as leaders, we always have to strive to make sure that the socializing aspect of it is work related as well as, you know, socializing in it.
Well put. We better, Melissa, I think it's now or never with a poll. It's been like DevSecOps psychological session here with the human factors and everything else, but it's been good. Can we do a poll real quick? These actually go really well. What is the biggest barrier agency is facing during pandemic? Identity access management, security concerns, lack of IT resources, lack of reliability and performance. And then the second one, which is pretty interesting, how has the cultural changes happening in federal DevOps space affected your agency? We'll give everybody a second to answer that. And let's see what we have. Melissa, you want to pop that up? I think we've given everybody a chance there. And for the audience, please ask away on the questions. Interesting. Anybody want to comment on that? Not too much negative. That's you know, it seems like culture change has been pretty positive since COVID. Considering everything that everybody has to go at home and the general feeling that everything is negative, I think that's pretty interesting. Anybody want to comment on this? Anything surprising? Okay. All right, let's do another one. We'll try another one, Alyssa, and then we'll go into a couple more questions. Okay, now this looks like an interesting one. Biggest challenge your agency faced when switching to remote work. Interesting. And where do you still see room for digital transformation within federal DevOps and federal IT as a whole? All right. What do we have, Alyssa? Pretty evenly distributed. I think that's interesting of itself.
I think it's interesting that the second highest response was not actually having any challenges, which is surprisingly good, I guess. You know, I mean, that was kind of my take too, was that, you know, we did pretty well, but
I think the second question is very interesting. Making automation a priority. I think that's breaking down organizational silos. Wow. I think that really sticks out to me.
That was mine.
You know, go ahead.
No, that's
go ahead and add some color, Todd.
So I selected that because I think one thing that, and I view this as a completely positive. I think that we had to break down organizational silos a little bit to enhance the collaboration. And one of my biggest fears about starting during a pandemic, and it's funny because I had a conversation with Mr. Jaffer, our CIO here, when I first started, and he asked me, you know, if I wanted to come into the office, and I was actually eager to, because I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to actually start a job and be successful if I couldn't at least kind of poke around a little bit and get my wherewithal. And maybe that is true, or maybe it's not. I don't really know anymore. All I know is that I settled right in. And from what I understand, a lot of the silos that may have been there, maybe they were just perceived to have been there, have been broken down, because we've been reduced to this kind of odd workforce now. And the collaboration is off the charts. That's all I can say. Not just horizontally, but vertically in this organization.
I always like to think more about building bridges than breaking down silos. And you know, I've been talking about breaking down silos in the DevOps community for almost 10 years. So I get to say it's wrong because I was saying it before. But like, it's my colleague, Michael Ducey, says, he's like, silos have a point, right? Like, if you think about a real silo, like, it keeps grain from exploding. And there's reasons for that we have these areas. And usually we create organizational silos out of protection of some kind, but there's reason like that we kind of, I don't want to go off on this tangent, but we, like, the no ops movement kind of over rotated that way, which was everybody can do everything. Well, no, everybody can't do everything, and don't try to make them. There's, like, you know, 12 10x engineers in the world, and they all work at Netflix. Okay, so let's move on and let's be realistic and have areas of expertise, but we have to build bridges. And I think that's what, like, Todd, what you're just saying just spoke to me, which was, now we're thinking about things cross-functionally, you know, because of, maybe it's just how we are now, and that's how we're so much more productive, but we can still be focused in our areas of expertise and have pride in that too.
You know, Matt, I think that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. And when I look down at the breaking down organization silos, I think building bridges is certainly a better way to view that. I'm going to have to put it out there, something maybe negative today. And, you know, for once, I suppose. And so DevSecOps, development, security, and operations, right? So in our organization, we have an entire division that's operations, an entire division that's security. They don't fall under the DevSecOps branch. So when we go to try to move things forward, when we go to try to move towards a new way of doing security and baking in security into every step of the process, to be honest with you, we've been having challenges in getting them involved with that. And that holds us back. Now, we've definitely developed a strong relationship with operations, especially since this whole pandemic has actually happened. So with operations, we work together every single day now. And so that is good. We certainly got a lot of friction because they're operating current operations. And so sometimes there's some conflict there. But so, you know, building those bridges, absolutely, Matt, we're trying our best to do that. But it certainly is complicated, especially when something like DevSecOps changes the whole way of security in the government from what they're currently used to. Their current way of doing an RMF package, for example, or, you know, it's that's going to change quite a bit as we move into the future.
Chris, I can
definitely on the security. Go ahead, Todd.
I was going to say I've seen those pillars established in different organizations, and I can totally relate to what you're saying. And fortunately, in my experience here at VA, some other really smart people got ahead of it and said, we're going to hire a deputy assistant secretary and put that person over development, security, and operations. So I have 430 of my ISOs embedded in my organization, even though there's a CISO that sits next to me. And the CISO is just a great guy, and I partner with him all the time. But I use those ISOs very much in an operational mode. And that's not to say that we're not still, I don't want to reduce DevSecOps just down to the ATO process, because part of the whole DevSecOps journey here at VA that we're still kind of on is embedding those good security practices into the actual coding and the testing and the monitoring that far exceed the lines of demarcation around the ATO process. But I just had to highlight on your point, not to take your negative and turn it into a positive. I'm not trying to shift things around, but this is the first time I've seen all three organizations embedded. So I have this opportunity, here really cross the internalization horizon.
DevSecOps is the bridge. You're not building a bridge between DevSecOps. You are the bridge.
I concur 100%.
So.
100%. Yep. That's why when I mentioned in the beginning that's become our role, is to try to connect all these things together, everything together, and to help people understand where we're trying to go. So yeah, that is how we view ourselves, Matt. Sometimes though, some days it doesn't feel like that.
Well, I think I saw something. It was a Gartner. I cannot find this anywhere. I think an analyst told me it takes like 30 times longer, more costly to remediate an error after the project's done than doing it while you're in development. So I think the government has a challenge. How these security folks are used to doing things a certain way. I think the key is automation, and then have the human element over the automation. These will never develop anything. It'll be just like it has been until very, very recently.
I just want to emphasize
go ahead
on that piece though. Yeah. So there are different challenges when it comes to security, right? Being securely adverse, right? In terms of finding the right solution for your needs or for your mission requirements, and you're speaking about authority to operate or ATO or risk management framework, right? There is a human element in every component. Everything is risk assessed and risk based. So I know some of these policies and procedures, as well as some of these workflows, are lengthy in process, but remember, each one of those individuals that are in the process have to inherit some type of risk, approving quickly or making a decision instantly, right? Because at the very end, if that entire team is responsible for it, then I think the decisions go faster. But if you have, some processes that are specifically catered by, a set few folks, then that risk becomes more problematic, or more, more critical in terms. But I just wanted to emphasize that, right, is that speed is great, but then risk, when you mix risk and speed together, I'll just leave it with that over.
Yeah. Well, we have a highly intelligent and informed audience. I did hear 30X comes from a NIST study, and that's conservative. Okay. Another question that I think is a good one from somebody in the audience. Do you feel like major IT initiatives or acquisitions been put on hold, running at the same pace, or accelerated? That's an interesting one. Maybe we'll start off with you, Todd. I know you're relatively new over there, but you have some experience at your old place too. How is this new calculus? Was there some shovel-ready projects that had to go quick, or what happened there?
Yeah, I think, one of the secretary's priorities here at the VA was the electronic health record, and there is a ton of momentum already behind that. And I think that, if anything, this pandemic and this kind of awareness that we need to go electronic has spurred more momentum in that direction. Since I've been here, we got an initiative that just kind of came in under the wire, and I don't think anyone was expecting it. I may be speaking out of turn, but an electronic GI Bill. So I think that there's more momentum now, and we're already on a modernization pathway, and so it really dovetails really well with where we're heading culturally to receive those types of project initiatives, and so I would say more. There's more emphasis and more momentum.
Chris, Ed, any thoughts?
I just want to echo what Todd said, right? Is that we have different methods and different ways on how we approach acquisition these days, either procuring like COTS products or homegrown solutions, right? The intent is that with this pandemic on hand, we had to be creative and innovative in a way to find some paths that before could have been seen as, long to be achieved. And right now they've kind of changed that culture, that transition from labs to operations very quickly. And one of them is, speaking of DoD's CIO decision, which is kudos to him and his team. They extended this, the team's capability up to June of 21, which was again within weeks. If you came before this pandemic and made these kind of decisions, if one would have said or asked the question, how long will it take you? I think humans are by nature, if you throw a problem at them and you say, I need an answer now, you most likely will get an answer. But if you say whenever you have time, in many cases, that becomes like our approach of, hey, it's not that very critical, so I'll just take my time. But I just want to emphasize, right, there are different ways, different means. There are different capabilities. And now if you're speaking of mission critical decisions, or if you get cost of life, on the VA side, on Navy side, on the transportation side, there are different components, right? You can't just go out there and just procure an asset or a product, right, without being fully vetted or fully being risked to ensure that they're secure and can be deployed within our infrastructure. It's easier to just purchase something and put it. It's harder to make it actually work in a government infrastructure, and especially given challenges like connectivity over virtual private networks, trying to transfer files or products left and right. Some of those challenges are impacts directly to automation and speed when it comes to DevSecOps. Inclusive to that, you throw procurements and logistics piece of it, right? And limitations in terms of how much you can procure. So it's a lengthy concept, it's a lengthy process, but I think smart folks always find a way how to make things happen in a timely fashion. Over.
Okay. Chris, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think that they covered really the highlights, but I would say when it comes to big initiatives, within our organization, kind of like what Edmund mentioned, it kind of depends on what it is that we're trying to do. And then, so the acquisition piece or moving forward some IT initiatives, I think so far it's been pretty good. I'm not sure that it's that aspect of it has been much different. We have been able to accelerate some IT initiatives, thankfully. But then the other piece is kind of what Edmund was saying. You can get a product, but because of the way you have to implement it in a government environment, this is complex. And I'm kind of looking at Matt's direction when it comes to implementing, for us, when it came to looking at implementing OpenShift in our environment, that was a lot more challenging than it needed to be because of our government way of doing things and because of the things that we are concerned about.
Yeah, I can second that, Chris.
Yeah.
It's challenging. I mean, you're trying to pull a Docker that's a gigabyte over a 1 megabyte, VPN connection, and you have 45 seconds to download that because your entire script infrastructure is called just, failed. Now you don't even know which part of your infrastructure is called failed, right? So you have to restart.
Right.
Well, if it makes you feel better, this was a problem in the private sector too for a long time, just in terms of software developers not understanding the way enterprises worked. So company I used to work at, we actually said we wanted to make our software engineers sit down and have to work on an enterprise lockdown laptop when they built our product, because they didn't understand that. No, why can't you just go out there and just pull? So I mean, it's a common thing, right? To sort of understand that where those constraints come in, and then the thing is, okay, then what do we do about them? And as we continue to grow our product and understand where those go, but it kind of goes in both directions too, because as the world is moving, we need to figure out what are the outcomes that these compliance policies are there to create versus compliance for the sake of compliance. But that is a whole other panel.
Yes, it is. And, Matt, just to add to this, so I was actually the CIO of a few hospital systems before I came into the government. And, when I think of the private sector, we would essentially get a tool. We would get something, we purchase it, we put it in our environment. We didn't have to worry so much about documenting how to use it or, things like that. And so in this environment, our government environment, we have months of work just to document. So if we move toward a container orchestrator, whether it's EKS or OpenShift or something like that, we have to define it, We have to then put together service level standards. We then have to put in together standard operating procedures. We then have to get other divisions to sign off on it and say, hey, you're good to put in our environment. It's, yeah.
Well, I think one of the takeaways we just said, it's like you have DevSecOps. Ops needs to know a little bit about Sec, and they need to know a little bit about Dev, and Dev needs to know about Ops, and needs to know about Sec, and live in each other's worlds a little bit.
I'll tell you a secret, man. It's been DevSecOps since the beginning. We just only called it DevOps, but it's always been DevSec, everybody ops. That's Patrick Dubois will tell you that all day long. It's you know, it's always been about that empathy and the understanding and the broad piece of that. Yeah, you have to understand where that goes, and the lines get blurry, man.
I think that's actually going to have to be the last word. My time management skills haven't been great on this. You guys are too damn interesting. Excuse me. Thank you all. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ed. And thank you, Matt. And thank the audience for hanging tough. Sorry we went a little overtime. Hopefully it's worth it. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Bye.